Dr. Sharon, I am so honored to be sitting with you. I loved the stress paradox, and I'm so excited to dive into it today with you.
I am so excited to be here.
Well, I just am blown away by the amount of research that I've noticed that you've done for this book. I was looking at all the references, and it felt kind of like a love letter to the world, like your patients and everything you've uncovered, the thousands of people that you've worked with. But tell us in your words, why did you choose to write this book and why now?
Well, it means a lot for me that you said that because it is really the culmination of 3 decades that I've spent in healthcare, both from the angle of the science and the research, as well as I've been in clinical practice, really with the same patients. So I'm one of those rare doctors that has a very long time and long-standing patient population. And over the years, there has been so much that I have done to work towards prevention, to
Mm.
approach healthcare differently, to help people build health and create hope and possibility in a way that is not the traditional path in healthcare. And I've seen this work for so many of my patients. I've used it in my own life for my own family. And I needed to have this on paper to be able to share it with as many people that want to receive this message.
Okay, this is so good. So just tell us, because the stress paradox, what is the stress paradox?
Yeah, so we're all familiar with stress as being something that's harmful. And there's a lot of medical studies supporting that. So it's certainly true. But in the last 2 decades, there's also been a lot of science, mostly because we can now look at the impact of our choices at the level of the cell and our molecules. And this science is showing that stress is also beneficial. And the really counterintuitive part is that we need stress to build resilience against the types of chronic stressors that are harming us. So, yes, too much stress is harmful, but not enough is actually just as harmful. And our goal isn't to entirely eliminate stress from our lives, it's to optimize it. And so it's really a new approach to stress management. It's stress 2.0.
I love it. And was there something either in your life or a patient's life or just the culmination of your work that made you kind of do this detour and say, hey, I think I need to pay attention to this? Like, what prompted that?
It's really been a life path. It's personal and professional. I was born in Iran, in Tehran, Iran, and in 1979 we came to this country. And whenever you're coming from a different country here, your parents choose to do this because they want a better life. So we came to this country, and all of a sudden there's possibility. And as a woman, there was possibility for education,
Mm.
possibility of freedom. And when I was in eighth grade, I was struggling to write a paragraph in English. And I graduated the valedictorian of my high school class, went to Yale for my undergrad, majored in biophysics and biochemistry, went to Harvard for medical school.
Wow.
And this whole notion of possibility and wanting a better life is what transmitted or transcended over to how I wanted to take care of my patients.
Mm.
Early in my career, a lot of my patients, despite getting the best care I knew to provide, and I have to credit a lot of people in my training for really training me well in a traditional healthcare sense. But despite that, I was still witnessing people suffering. People were struggling with their health. And even though we had their numbers well controlled, they were on the right medications, it was not alleviating the suffering.
Yes.
And in my heart, I knew I wanted them to have a better life. I wanted them to have hope and possibility. And that is what led me to rethink how we deliver care. It took me down a path of wanting to learn everything, not just about how to treat disease, but how do we build health? And it's a very different approach than what I was really ever taught. So it was a lot of learning on my own, weekends, early mornings, learning everything about nutrition, exercise, lifestyle, because ultimately that is the most powerful way to build health. And along the way, I came across all this research on stress,
Mm.
how the hormetic stressors, which is the type we're talking about here. Hormesis is the science of good stress. It's from the Greek word to excite, and how
Yes.
these good stressors can activate parts of our DNA, of our biology, that help our bodies heal itself. And we have this incredible capacity. And if we just support our bodies and do things that align with what brings out this innate ability, we can live happy, long, healthy lives. And this is just such new research. I felt that this was not something that was getting communicated. And I've spent 2 decades in this space of prevention and lifestyle. Yet, so much of the conversations are around what we should be avoiding, like do not eat processed foods, do not be sedentary, avoid chronic stress. That it creates this mindset of restriction, of fear that we're in this sick environment and we're all going to get sick because, we're helpless. And this science of good stress is about how we can choose to add, right? It's about the abundance, the growth. It's about hope. And I felt that this is how we give people control, right? This is how we build resilience to the things that we cannot often control in our environment that may be toxic to our health.
Absolutely. I love this so much. And when I was reading your book, I thought, what a gift this is for everyone who picks it up because the way that you break it up and you help us understand. And you even wrote in it that it's kind of when I was in nutrition school, they taught us about this idea of like crowding out the bad.
I view our health as a health savings account. When you have what I call a bad stress, right? Essentially, I view all of these lifestyle things that we do as a form of stress. But processed foods, for example, are taking away from that savings account, right? They're a
Mm.
withdrawal. And when we take on these good stressors, we are depositing into that account. So we're essentially building a fund that we can draw from. And the
Mm.
reason this works is the very same things that these good stressors help us rebuild and repair and regenerate, this the pathways and the impact it has on our cells are the very same pathways that lead to disease, to the symptoms we're experiencing, to the acceleration of premature mortality.
Mm.
So there's such a overlap between the science of good stress and kind of what leads to disease and morbidity, right?
Yes.
And that's why these are such powerful lifestyle tools.
So, can you help us understand? Because I read something in your book. I know that you said that 80% of disease is preventable. I think that's really important for people to take in. Prevention is key. We talk a lot about that on the show. But you wrote about some trends, and I think before we go into how we can add in the good stress, understanding all the bad stress and what's happening to our health environment. You said the trends show we are getting fatter, sicker, and more medicated than ever. In 1994, shortly after I started medical school, only 2 states had an obesity rate greater than 18%, and only 1 state had a rate of diabetes of 6% or higher. And by 2015, these rates of obesity and diabetes had spread to all 50 states. So we're talking about mitochondria, metabolic health, like all of these precursors to the bad things we don't want to happen, the heart disease and everything. Help us understand what happened, like what's going on, and then we can dive into some of the good things that you've talked about in the book to help course correct.
Right. I mean, the trends are staggering and they're
Yes.
they're just getting worse. I mean, those rates that you just read, I mean, just very recently, I think we have now crossed the threshold where 75% of America is overweight or obese. And these are global trends. And they're not just happening in adults, they're happening in younger people. So this is such a wake up call for the younger generation, for our kids. And we have got to do something to change these trends. I mean, complete course correction.
Yes.
We need to reduce the reliance on medication, which has been such a big part of my mission because we will never achieve the same level of health when we try and just take a medication versus change our lifestyle because medications work on one pathway. When we take on any type of lifestyle habit,
Yes.
are changing our entire biology. Multiple pathways get affected. And it is in a way that is so natural that there are only good side effects. So that's key. But to your question of what is it in our environment? Well,
Yes.
if you look at the past really 2 centuries, really since industrialization, it's accelerated. Our lifestyles have radically changed. We are consuming processed foods. We did not have, food processing technology until a couple hundred years ago.
Yeah.
Are, of course, now with this information era, we are glued to screens. We're not just more sedentary, but we are literally getting addicted to these quick notifications because our brain loves novelty.
Yeah.
That's what releases dopamine. And we get these quick hits. So we want to check for that text message. And these short term gratifications are taking away from the deeper concentration and learning and meaningful activities we can be doing. And our bodies are wired for the processed food, for the fat, sugar, salt, right? That's what leads to a surge of dopamine
Yes.
at a level that exceeds our genetic capacity to handle because these are foods that are engineered with the right combination of fat, sugar, salt, and texture and crunch, right? Food scientists engineer this with focus groups, seeing what part of our brain lights up on these PET scans when we have the biggest surge of dopamine, right? So little old us is going through the grocery store and we're up against all this food that's engineered. So, of course, our society, our culture, our food environment, our everyday choices are being defaulted into ones that what I want to bring to the forefront is that it's not just the introduction of all of these changes in our environment, of things that are harming us, but over the last 200 to 300 years, we have also worked out of the fabric of our daily lives the things that activate our innate healing and repair processes.
Mm.
So our ancestors naturally every day had to eat a variety of edible plant food to survive. They had to, whether they were old, young, they had to sprint at some point to either avoid a predator or to hunt. They had to endure heat and cold because we didn't have air conditioning and heating in the hunter gatherer days. They had to endure like learning new things, thinking beyond the horizon. I mean, this is how we develop tools. This is how we as humans thrived as a species. And the radical changes over the last 200 to 300 years have taken away the need for these biological stressors, these types of, environmental stress that our ancestors for really 2 million plus years endured. And it's this lack of stress, this lack of good stress that's been brought about by modernity that is making us vulnerable to disease, to accelerated aging.
Mm.
So it's just as much a risk factor as, what we've eliminated, right? Is just as much of a risk factor of compared to what we've added. And I feel like it's not, things that aren't seen are discounted. And I think the awareness of how vital it is for us to reintroduce what stressors our ancestors thrived on, because our DNA, our genome has adapted to need these stressors to keep us healthy. This is how our body defends against the multitude of environmental stressors that are harming us every day. I mean, what people may not know is every day our DNA gets 10,000 injuries. Profound, right?
It's
One
huge. What? Yes. No, we don't know this.
every minute. I mean, the amount that our body is actively healing and repairing is really profound,
Wow.
but we are not allowing our body to do its work because there's a basal amount of healing that is happening, but these good stressors are what activate this ability. And because we're not activating it, we are out of balance. We are incurring the harm without adequate repair. And that is accelerating disease just as much as what we're adding or doing to ourselves actively, like through the processed food.
I had just had like the biggest aha. I kind of got it when I was reading the book, but as you're talking, I'm thinking about that's why when you hear about the rates of cancer rising in kids or even like colon cancer for younger demographic, I just had my colonoscopy at, 54. I know the recommendation's now 45. But that people younger than 50, that the rates are increasing, or even breast cancer in younger and younger populations. This is why your work is so important because you're right. We've gone away from everything intuitively that our body knows to do. Get the movement, get the fresh air, get the sunlight, eat those plant foods, move in a way that, yes, that like we're being chased by a lion for, 5 minutes and then we rest. I'm obviously, joking a little bit, but, our bodies were hardwired and programmed a certain way, and we've gone totally counter to that. So I want the women who are listening to understand how they can take back the control for themselves and their families, because we're not just talking about longevity. They talk about us living longer. We want health span, not just lifespan.
100%. And you just summarized it so beautifully. And for people, this is really for women listening, we tend to not put ourselves first on this list of taking care of ourselves. And what we are doing when we choose good stress is we are building resilience. Resilience creates a coherence, really, in our heart. And the reason it's actually one of the most generous things you can do to invest in yourself to build resilience is it's really from quantum physics. We know that we have a biomagnetic field around our heart that emits a certain energy. This energy is like a magnet that will attract and it can also repel depending on the energy that's being emitted. And when we invest in building this nice energy, this coherent energy, we inspire creativity rather than fear.
Mm.
We exude calm instead of chaos. What we are doing without saying a word is lifting those up around us. We have got to do the hard work to become that force, that positive force in the life of everyone around us. We're communicating our energy in ways that are so nonverbal, but we communicate more through these ways that are kind of the intangible. And when you're investing in yourself, you are investing in lifting up you touch And I think it's so important to really invest in that. And I believe that you have got to be willing to get uncomfortable in the service of becoming that resilient, strong, resonant self.
That's so beautiful. I just received that, and I know the women are going to. That is so beautiful. So help us start. I mean, you're a mom, you've got kids, you've got a huge practice. You just spent 2 years writing this book. I mean, you're out doing all these things. The invitation here is to get off the sidelines, get back, give back to yourself in some way. You talked about a client in your book, your patient who was giving to her elderly mom who was not well and taking care of her family and was so depleted. And you suggested she go take a painting class because she said that's what she would be doing if she wasn't so stressed out. So help us unpack this some more and help us integrate some of these amazing tools you talked about in the book.
Yeah, so the key hormetic stressors, just as an overview, there are five
Please.
that I talk about in the book, and the common thread is that they're all hormetic stressors. They are brief, intermittent stress, which is what differentiates good stress from chronic stress.
Okay.
And these five are plant chemicals called phytochemicals, high intensity interval training and exercise, heat and cold, circadian fasting, which is eating in a less than 12-hour window with most of your calories kind of earlier in the day than in the evening, and mental and emotional challenges that are meaningful and align with your belief system. And that is what led to me having this conversation with a person about doing what they love. And the beautiful thing about all of these is that they activate a gene program called Vita genes, or this is short for vitality genes, an ancient conserved sequence of genes that ramp up our innate ability to do what I call the 4 Rs. We resist damage from inflammation and oxidative stress.
Yes.
We recycle. We can recycle damaged parts through a process of autophagy so that our bodies or our cells essentially take to a junkyard the damaged components and recycle, salvage what it can, use the rest for energy. We repair, so we were talking about repairing DNA. We also have repair functions for our proteins through heat shock proteins and the unfolded protein response. And the proteins are the workhorse in our body. I mean, we have anywhere from 20,000 to 100,000 different types that are doing all this work. And we recharge our bodies. We can create better energy by improving the health of our mitochondria, which builds our metabolic health, that we not only can create new mitochondria, but we can turn over damaged mitochondria through a process called mitophagy. It's just a selective form of autophagy that specifically looks for damaged parts of mitochondria, helps us kind of repair and recycle our mitochondria so that we're creating cleaner, less polluted energy in our body, because in the process of creating energy, our mitochondria release these free radicals that can be damaging. So the healthier the mitochondria, the less of these free radical emissions that are being released in our body. So these 4 Rs are what we're activating when we take on these good stressors. And it is really such a unifying way of becoming healthier from a systems biology foundational level. Because when we make ourselves healthier, we make every part of our body healthier. Our cells are the smallest unit in our body. We have over 30 trillion cells. If a cell in our brain is healthy, which is a neuron, we think better, our mood is better. If a cell in our heart is healthier, well, our heart pumps better. If a cell in our muscle is stronger, that cell can generate better energy. We have more endurance. So when you are improving the health of your cells, you are creating whole body health. And that is what is making these good stressors such a powerful lever of improving overall health.
I think this is like, again, one of the huge takeaways from your book and then this conversation, because our health is truly in our hands and there's ways that we can do this. I love in the book you wrote, you are never too old or too unhealthy to make more mitochondria and increase your energy production and regain metabolic function. So you are saying we have agency. And there's so much that we can do. So let's give the women some specifics based on the five stressors, the good stressors. In terms of plant-based protective toxins, it's interesting, and I don't know if this is exactly right. There's a doctor out there who's saying like don't eat certain vegetables because they have protective mechanism and this harms you, and that never resonated with me. And you're like, yeah, these plants have these protective toxins and that helps you. That resonates with me. So let's talk about this. You might not, I'm not going to name that. I don't even remember which doctor it was, but it didn't make sense to me. I'm like, no, we need these plants.
Right. I mean, we have thousands of epidemiologic studies that show people who eat more fruits and vegetables, live longer, they have lower rates of cancer. I mean, just there are over 200 studies that show about a 50% reduction in cancer risk from eating the recommended fruits and vegetables. So we know epidemiologically that these plants have to somehow be helping us.
Yes.
When I'm talking about adding the plants, I also want to say that this is all about abundance and adding. You can have any dietary pattern you want. You can be a carnivore, an omnivore, a vegetarian, a vegan. The idea here is you want to just add a little bit of plant to activate your body's innate healing ability. So plants do have essentially toxins. These toxins are phytochemicals. And let me explain why they're toxins. So, when plants are in the wild and they're exposed to sunlight, to drought, to pests, insect, us, anyone that can eat them, they make phytochemicals as a form of building stress resistance that kind of deters us. So these phytochemicals are like natural pesticides. They're there to help the plant survive. When we consume the plant, it works like a stressor in our body and it activates our stress resistance. And part of the reason we kind of evolved this way is for most of our human history, we co-evolved with plants and we have created this synergistic existence, right? Every part of us as humans is interconnected to the natural world around us. We're interconnected to each other. Like you cannot view health in isolation. But our ancestors had to learn how to eat as many edible plants as possible because that's how they would survive. They needed calories. So their bodies learned how to rapidly detoxify these toxins, right? We have this incredible ability to quickly metabolize these phytochemicals, and a very, very small amount actually gets absorbed in our body. And what does get absorbed in our body ramps up our antioxidant defenses. Like
Wow.
that's how we adapt. We adapt in a way that builds our antioxidant defenses. And this is a radical rethinking of our relationship with food because historically we've always thought, oh, I'm going to eat this blueberry to get antioxidants. And we think that we are consuming the antioxidant. But when you measure the amount that we actually end up absorbing, it is in like nanomolar amounts, and we need micromolar amounts to essentially negate the free radical damage. So the numbers
Yes.
simply don't add up. And what's really happening is a hormetic response. The phytochemicals in the blueberry are activating our stress response because our bodies perceive it as a good stress. It activates this gene program we're talking about, these Vita genes, and they have the program that ramps up our antioxidant defenses. So we need food not to get antioxidants. We need food because it gives the instruction to our DNA to build our innate ability to defend ourselves against all this oxidative damage that's in our environment.
Again, another reason why I love your book so much. It's like so, it makes so much sense when you explain it, but nobody knows this. You're right. We think we're getting our antioxidants from eating all the pretty the rainbows and the berries. Um, but this makes so much sense. Is it true that our bodies are, constantly making like disease or like cancers? And so in theory that these any this what you're talking about is what is in fact clears it, so which is why it's so important to do that. Is that true? I've read something like that before.
It is. So we have, well, there are environmental factors that are damaging our DNA, that are creating oxidative stress. So pollutants, just again, air pollution, cigarette smoke, UV light. The foods that we're eating are creating
Yes.
oxidative stress. Being sedentary creates oxidative stress. So our modern lifestyle creates oxidative stress. The process of metabolism in our mitochondria making energy creates free radicals. So some of it is made by our body. And as we get older, our mitochondria get impaired just as a function of aging. We lose the volume of our mitochondria. So some of it is also age related.
Hmm.
But the key here is yes, all this happens, but what can we control? And the answer
Yes.
is a heck of a lot.
Yes.
And these good stressors are giving us back control. Like this is the blueprint of how we can counter all of the damage that is happening every day and just as a function of getting older. But we can, to your point, age so much healthier,
Yes.
be around for our grandkids, and be vital, active, thriving grandparents for our grandkids, not just, having them sit in our lap in a rocking chair.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is why we need to do the work.
Yes. Yes. I think of my parents, they have a salad every day, a large salad, lots of fruits and vegetables. My mom always had us eating that way from the time we were little. And I think it's why they're not on multiple meds in their 80s. I think, that's why I'm like, touch wood, they're doing very well. Yes. But I think about that all the time. And I think part of it is culturally. I'm first generation on my mom's side, and she brought a lot of that, those traditional foods and stuff that are very much aligned with what you're talking about. So I'm grateful for her. But a lot of people don't have that or don't know to do that. Give us an example from how you live, because I think it's relatable when they hear, okay, this is what Dr. Sharon does. Just maybe even with your breakfast or, how you integrate some of this into your day to day.
Uh, Absolutely, because in some ways it can seem intimidating. And sometimes you think that's for other people who have, the time and the resources. But I work full time. I have three children. I come home very late after clinic, and we do very quick, simple meals. I mean, I'm not going to claim they're gourmet, but they are from fresh ingredients with, good sources of protein and fruits and vegetables and getting a lot of plants in there as well. Um, I think the key here is, first of all, meal planning, which goes a long way because I batch what I make. If I am making whole grains, which do take a while to cook, I'm usually making three times the amount I would need for one meal. And throughout the week, I have some ready to go that I can throw in a different meal. I use a lot of frozen. So when vegetables or fruit are frozen or flash frozen at the peak of ripeness,
Yes.
they maintain a lot of the nutrients. And so some shortcuts are okay. You don't have to go pick every, piece of fruit and vegetable. And we keep them in our freezer. We have lots of kind of backup. for the days we don't get to the store. And it just takes a little bit of planning of saying, okay, if I made a smoothie today that had blueberries, what I really try and do is introduce variety. So the key here to get the most health benefit from these plants is you want to add, as much as you do, the more the better. But a key here is you want the diversity of the plant. You want the diversity of the phytochemicals. Okay, there are 30,000 edible foods in this world. We cultivate around 150, and only 30 of them make it to the average plate. Okay, we've
Wow.
taken away so much of the stimulus of the different phytochemicals because there are thousands or estimates of up to 100,000 phytochemicals. Not all of them have been isolated.
Amazing.
So, and each one can activate different healing properties. So you want the diversity. So if I had a smoothie with blueberry one day, well, I have big bags of frozen everything. The next day it's going to be strawberry. The next day it's going to be mango. And these simple swaps go a long way. I think a lot of my patients eat healthy because they're trying to avoid processed foods and they're trying to do more fruits and vegetables. But it's human nature to get in a pattern where, okay, this is my smoothie. I eat this every morning. It just makes it so we don't have to think much about what our breakfast is going to be or what our dinner is going to be. But the key here is keep the basic template, but just swap out the fruit or the vegetable or the grain. And in the book, in the stress paradox, what I really wanted people to have is not just recipes. I wanted people to have templates. So there are 10 templates of, how do you make a sheet pan meal? How do you make a one pot meal? How do you make an oatmeal, and then from there are so many suggestions for swaps. So once you learn a template, you don't just learn how to make one recipe. You can make 20 variations.
Yes.
And I think that's such an important part of becoming comfortable in the kitchen. And, and it's really two hormetic stressors in one, right? You're challenging yourself and learning,
Yes.
and your
Yes.
plants.
Okay, this is so good. And I did appreciate that you included that in the book because I was looking through, I'm like, oh, some of these look so delicious. And it's nice to have that framework. Talk to us about movement because I think there's so much contradictory information out there and women are confused. Like, am I in zone two? Am I doing like what am I supposed to be doing? So tell us about good stress as it relates to movement.
Yeah, I think some of the confusion around movement is that exercise is a stress. And like all stressors, it can raise cortisol. And there's almost a fear of raising cortisol.
Mm,
You need the cortisol to bring on the adaptations. The stronger the stimulus, and if you can get that intense burst of cortisol, that is what leads to the adaptations in the muscle. So you need a strong stimulus. When you get that short burst of cortisol and then your body goes back to baseline, you actually get to a lower baseline level of cortisol. Okay, what matters is your basal level of cortisol, not these spikes, these intermittent brief spikes. Again, these are hormetic. This is what our biology feeds on.
mm,
It's very different than a chronically elevated cortisol level. And, I think there's a little bit of fine tuning if people are under a lot of stress or haven't had adequate recovery. And maybe, I define high intensity as essentially just pushing yourself outside your comfort zone, right? That's going to be different person to person. It's going to be different for the same person on different days, depending on,
yes.
whether you recovered with adequate food or with adequate rest, right? But the goal here is just to feel a little bit of discomfort followed by recovery. And this recovery piece is huge
Okay.
during the stress mode. So, in this case, the high intensity exercise, the intensity, the stress is giving ourselves the signal to go into a stress resistant mode. This is when we do the repair. We set ourselves up to be more energy efficient with mitochondria, where our bodies are doing this recycling, the autophagy. The recovery is the period where our body remodels, it reconfigures. And if you go through stress without the recovery, you aren't getting the benefits of the stress. So
Mm.
stress recovery, right? It's like yin and yang, peanut butter and jelly. Like if you separate the two, you don't get the benefit. And without the recovery, if you stack stress upon stress, you create chronic stress. So even a good stress can become harmful if
Yes.
done in excess and without that intermittent pattern. And that's true of exercise. So, but the stronger the stimulus, the greater the adaptation. And that's the key here, that you do want some intensity, and don't fear it, because it's a different pattern of cortisol release.
Yes, and it's good for us. So if I came to you, midlife woman, and I said, okay, Dr. Sharon, I haven't been very active. Like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to commit to the good stress. What would that look like? What would that translate to in terms of, I know it's very individual, but like, what could I potentially start exploring doing?
And so I think any workout routine has to have multiple components. You've got to have some flexibility training so you don't hurt yourself in good form. You need resistance training to build muscle, and you need aerobic fitness, because your aerobic fitness or cardiorespiratory fitness is the strongest predictor of longevity and staying healthy as you get older.
Okay.
What I focus on in the book for the protocol is this component of cardiorespiratory fitness, because that is what's best studied for improving the health of our mitochondria. And that works as one of the most potent hormetic stressors for creating new mitochondria and mitophagy, this whole process of cleaning out the mitochondria that are creating these bad emissions, right? So we become these renewable energy plants. And the key for creating the healthier mitochondria is mitochondria don't just generate energy in our body. We are learning that they are the communication hub. They form this intricate grid where they are communicating with each other. And this is the communication. This is the life force that is going throughout our whole body. And the mitochondria are even the communication hub, communicating with our different body systems. They communicate with our circadian biology, they communicate with our immune system. They are really becoming front and center of the glue that brings together so much of our health. So, for people who want to build this mitochondrial health and build their aerobic fitness,
Yes.
largely reflected in the health of their mitochondria, if you are starting from a place where you don't do anything, I mean, first of all, just start anywhere, but usually you want to start with some just moderate intensity aerobic activity. Moderate intensity is like on a scale of 1 to 10, where 10 just seems like you're doing all out sprint and 0 is no effort. You want to be around a 5 or a 6. You want to be able to still talk, but in very breathy sentences. And
Okay.
try and do that, and increase the duration as much as you can. Maybe day one, it's 5 minutes. Maybe you can work up to 10 minutes, but you want to get this good base, because you're already building mitochondria. You're improving your body's ability to use the mitochondria to create energy.
Yes.
Without healthy mitochondria, we use a different energy system called the glycolytic pathway that is far less efficient. Like we only make 2 ATP out of a glucose molecule using this glycolytic pathway. We can make over 30 if we use the glucose through our mitochondrial energy path.
Mm.
So when our mitochondria are impaired, we simply can't make energy. We fatigue really quickly. So you want to work your way up slowly to increase your mitochondria so your body can actually create the energy you need for endurance. So it is really important to reintroduce the intensity. And again, we are made for this. It sounds hard and it sounds intimidating because we've removed this from the fabric of our lives. But this is what our biology was made for. So trust that your body can do this. Your body is made to do this. And once you get to the other side of getting this healthy mitochondria, you have so much energy and it just gets easier, right? So
Mm,
the irony here is that this is hardest for people who need it the most, right? Because ultimately our bodies work through bioplasticity,
mm,
which is that it's essentially the biological way of saying use it or lose it, right? In our brain, we call it neuroplasticity. But the more you push, the more the body adapts to increase its capacity. The less you do, the body actually loses its capacity. We are rewiring and reconfiguring our body at all times.
wow.
So, not doing this is actually making us vulnerable and weaker. And that is why it is a risk factor for a disease, mental and physical, right? So, you do want to introduce this, but don't get intimidated because high intensity for someone starting out is very different than high intensity for an athlete.
Yes.
It just is, you just have to push, right? So, one thing I encourage my patients to do is most people walk as their preferred form of exercise.
Yes.
And at least once or twice a week during their walk, I just tell them do it in intervals where instead of steady state of keeping that same pace for their 20-minute, 30-minute walk, to do 3 minutes fast and then back off and do 3 minutes slow, catch your breath. 3 minutes fast, back off and slow, catch your breath. So walk in intervals, which is a form of high intensity interval training that uses not like sprint intervals, like all out, but it is still interval training. And just doing that, so there have been studies, like there's a study in Japan on middle and older age people just doing interval walking compared to a group that walked at a steady pace. And the group that walked in intervals had better cardiorespiratory fitness, better cellular health, lower cardiometabolic risk factors. So, something that simple. So, take your favorite exercise. If you like to be on an elliptical, if you are on a bike, if you like to Peloton, just do it in intervals, like fast for a few minutes, ideally for like 4 minutes or so, anywhere from 2 to 5 minutes. So, you don't want to do sprint interval when you're only doing the intensity for 30 seconds and then you're gassed because you want to be at that higher intensity for a longer amount of time to build the adaptation. So you're better off doing like 4 minute intervals than doing one or two like 30-second all out intervals. So
Yes.
kind of it's more high intensity, not sprint intensity. So people do heart rate, you're at 80 to 95% of your maximum predicted heart rate. You're not going for the 100%.
Okay, this is so good. And we're coming towards the end of our time, and there's like so much more, but that's why people are going to pick up the book. Let's just shift because at the very end of your book, you wrote that we are each born with something to bring to this world. And I couldn't agree more. Any advice for the women listening about this aspect? I mean, clearly you are doing the work you were gifted to bring to the world. And I'm so grateful to you. Ladies, when you pick up this book, you will understand it's just so comprehensive and it makes so much sense. Like I said, we don't have time. It would have to be a part two, but like, the hot and cold and like it's so fascinating and it makes sense when you read it, but we need to be doing this for the prevention. So invite us, how would you invite us to step off the sidelines? What would you say, Dr. Sharon?
Yeah, so I do believe that every one of us has limitless potential to live a better life. And first thing is just to know that what you need to make that happen is already in you. And do not let your fear of being in a situation that makes you uncomfortable stop you from pursuing it, because that is the gateway to growth. So stress, recover, repeat. Stress, recover, repeat. You do it in small amounts. The recovery piece is key. And we can all use this blueprint to live the life that we want and to love the life that we create.
So beautiful. Is there anything you want to leave the women listening with around the work that you're doing before we sign off today?
Yeah, so anyone who wants to learn more, so certainly the book, The Stress Paradox, is available. They can get it at all the major retailers. There's a link on my website to the retailers, drsharonbergquist.com. There's a free download if anyone wants 10 tests that are simple, affordable. Some of them are DIY tests. If you want to get a snapshot of where your health is now and how you are trending towards aging, you can download this free guide. It also includes really DIY, cost-free ways of testing your VO2 max, which is your cardiorespiratory fitness. I'm a big believer that health is simple and it is affordable to all of us. So I encourage people to download, get a snapshot of where they're at, and try incorporating some good stressors. Retest in about 6 months. See if you can move the needle, and you can be very objective in a measurable way to tell yourself and to know if you're making progress and how to tweak. Because the book has protocols that are there to be customized. And they're really more, again, a template. How do you incorporate cold? How do you incorporate a good mental challenge? How do you incorporate high intensity interval? And you can tweak and adjust based on what feels right to you, what's uncomfortable. You just want a little bit of discomfort, but you want to stay safe. You don't want to get overwhelmed. So I think measuring your outcomes is a really important part. I mean, that's what I do in my clinical practice, and I encourage people to do it really at minimal cost on their own.
Okay. And is that on your website, that free download?
Yes, the download
Okay.
website.
Perfect. So all of the show notes will be on on your podcast player, ladies. So that link will be right there for you to just click right on, as well as all the resources. Please go ahead. What were you going to say?
Oh, and you can always follow me on social media as well.
Oh yes, I'll have all your social on the podcast player too, because I think once women hear this, they're going to want to get the book and then also follow you and learn more and figure out how to integrate it. Because what I'm taking away from it is it's essential. 80% of disease is preventable. So there, we have so much more agency than we think sometimes. We're living in a modernized world that doesn't necessarily honor or integrate with our ancestry and how our body was designed to work and operate in the world. So we need to get that back into alignment so that we can rid ourselves of disease that might be brewing or just keep ourselves as healthy as long as possible. I mean, it's doable. What I'm hearing is it's so doable. And the research you're doing is groundbreaking. And I'm so grateful to you. I'm so grateful for this book that you've put out, for your curiosity, for the gift that you are, and that you have the courage to bring to the world. So I've loved this conversation, and I'm so grateful that you've been here today.
Oh, thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. I've loved the opportunity to share this.
Thank you so much.